By the last week of June 1944, the matter was already settled, and what remained was mostly counting. Two Japanese carrier fleets had thrown their planes against the American ships covering the landings in the Marianas, and hardly any of them came back. The force that had opened the war at Pearl Harbor and run wild across half an ocean in the months after had been spent in 2 days over the Philippine Sea. The men who flew against the American carriers that week could see the result plainly enough. What none of them could ever quite account for was the machine that had produced it. The thing they were up against did not live in the air. It lived on the deck of an American carrier, in a routine so ordinary to the men who ran it that few of them ever thought it worth writing down. A fleet carrier was a small steel town with a single industry, which was putting aircraft into the sky and getting them back down. Everything else aboard existed to serve that one process. The recovery of a single airplane, seen from the level of a man on the deck, ran the same way every time. At the very stern, on a small exposed platform, a landing signal officer held a pair of bright paddles and read the approach of a machine aimed more or less at his own body. He waved it down, or he waved it off. If the plane came in clean, its tailhook grabbed one of the steel wires stretched across the deck, and several tons of metal went from flying speed to a dead stop inside a few yards. The instant it halted, the hook came free, and the pilot gunned the engine and rolled forward under his own power. All of that took only seconds. Ahead of the wires stood a barrier, a heavy web of cable raised across the deck like a net strung for machines. Its purpose was simple and grim. If a landing plane missed the wires, the barrier would catch it before it could plow into the crowd of aircraft parked forward. That crowd was the whole secret of the thing. The front half of the flight deck was a parking lot, jammed with machines that had already come down, and the back half was the runway. The moment one taxied past the barrier, the cable dropped, the deck lay open again, and the next arrival was already swinging onto its approach. From the other side, none of this was visible. A Japanese pilot bearing down on an American task force saw only the results. The fighters overhead in numbers that never seemed to thin, however many were shot down, and the fresh strikes leaving those decks while his own formations were still trying to pull together. After the war, when American officers questioned the surviving Japanese commanders, the same puzzlement kept rising to the surface. They knew the enemy had possessed more of everything, and they reached for that. Masatake Okumiya, who had served on a carrier staff through the worst of it, later summed up the whole tragedy in a single dry line: that Japan had gone to war at sea and in the air under men who understood neither. What almost none of them named was the flight deck. What decided the matter was not any single invention, but a choice about how to use the deck. The American way was to treat the whole forward deck as a standing park, and to take planes aboard in a continuous stream, one behind the next, without ever stopping to clear the deck between them. This was faster than anything the enemy could manage. It was also more dangerous, and the danger had been taken on deliberately with open eyes. A navy that brings its aircraft down onto a deck already crowded has decided that speed is worth the wrecks, and now and then, worth the men. Everything about the deck was built to keep that stream moving. Elevators set into the very edge of the deck lifted fresh machines up from the hangar without ever blocking the landing run. Folding wings let the parked craft be packed together, wingtip over wingtip. Gangs of plane handlers threw their weight against tail fins and wheels to drag each one clear by hand. When a plane missed the wires, the barrier caught it. When, less often, it missed the barrier as well, it rolled into the park among the fueled and loaded machines, and men died, and the burning wreck was heaved over the side so the deck could go on working. The same hunger for speed showed in how the ships themselves were built. An American carrier held its aircraft in one large hangar open along the sides and laid its flight deck in wood over the steel hull without armor. An open hangar moved planes and fuel and men through it fast, and a plank deck could be patched with timber and steel in a few hours after a hit. The price of all that openness was fire. A ship arranged this way, crowded with fueled machines and open to the wind, could go up faster than a more cautiously built one. The men who designed her knew it, and chose the speed anyway. The Japanese ran their carriers on a different principle, and not a foolish one. They brought their aircraft down and struck them below into an enclosed hangar where the machines could be fueled and armed under cover and sent up again in ordered batches. That way was tidier and easier on the ship, since the fuel and the bombs stayed below the flight deck instead of standing out in the open. It was also a great deal slower, and ranging a full strike up on deck could eat the better part of an hour. Over a long war, that gap in tempo compounded week upon week until it had become the whole distance between the two fleets. The slowness lived in the sequence itself. A returning strike came down and the planes went straight below on the elevators, out of the weather and out of sight. In the hangar, the crews refueled and rearmed them, now and then swapping their weapons entirely when the target had changed, and only then sent them back up, a handful at a time, to be set out on deck in the order they would take off. Every step of it was safer for being done under cover. Every step also cost minutes, and the minutes piled up while an American deck was still turning its planes around in the open air. It is tempting to call the American way efficient, but that is the wrong word for it. What happened on that deck was closer to a controlled accident, repeated every 40 seconds or so, a piece of work that held together only because every man on it had accepted how lethal it was. This is why the enemy's explanation always came out a little wrong. Hunting for the source of the tempo, they reached for what was easy to see and easy to name: the extra carriers, the extra fuel, the better radar. All of it was real, and all of it missed the point. The true answer was duller than any of that and far harder to copy, because it was not a piece of equipment at all. It was a way of running a deck, a trained willingness to accept danger that a whole navy had worked down into its bones. The day before that last night had already broken the back of the enemy carrier force. On the 19th of June, the two fleets came within air range of one another, and the Japanese threw wave after wave of their planes at the ships covering the beachhead. It did them almost no good. Radar caught the raiders far out, and the fighter directors on the American carriers steered their own fighters onto the incoming formations, while the attackers were still well out over open water. The enemy squadrons fell in such numbers and at such small cost to the defenders that the pilots doing the shooting began calling the day a turkey shoot, and the name stuck. By dusk, the Japanese had lost the greater part of the aircrew they had spent 2 years struggling to rebuild. The method showed its other face on the evening of the 20th. Late in the day, American scouts finally found the retreating enemy carriers at the far edge of the strike plane's reach, and Mitcher launched anyway, knowing his crews would have to come home in the dark and that some would run their tanks dry doing it. They sank a carrier and turned back toward a night with no horizon at all. What came next was the deck cycle shoved well past its limit. Pilots who had never once landed in darkness, flying on the last of their fuel, felt for a fleet that had blacked itself out against submarines. Then Mitcher made the decision that has kept his name alive. He ordered the whole task force to turn on its lights, every searchlight and signal lamp and deck light aimed straight up into the night. One aviator said the sea below him had suddenly become a big city. It was a beautiful thing to see and a terrible thing to fly into. Even lit, the recovery came apart. Planes set down on the wrong carriers or ran their tanks dry while circling and dropped into the water short of the deck. Something like 80 of them went down that night, in the sea and on the decks, though rescue ships pulled most of the crews out alive over the days that followed. By the next morning, the deck gangs had shoved the wrecks aside and made the decks ready again, because more flying waited, and the deck would run exactly as it had run the day before.